Chair, can I say a couple of things? Firstly, the time that we're allowed here will only give us the opportunity to start the exploration. And I think that has to be said to residents here and who are tuning in and who are part of this absolutely massive, it's like an epidemic, isn't it, really, across London. The scale of noise nuisance is absolutely widespread, and we've heard this morning it is damaging the health and well-being of Londoners. And I mean, one of the things that I'm just going to go and ask Duncan about is really how long TfL has known about this, because from the people I've worked with now for over 10 years building the case, it's clear to me that TfL should have known about this and should have taken this into consideration. I also want to start, Duncan, by welcoming your apology to Londoners for the distress, discourtesy and the disrespect that they have experienced over the years and continue to experience. And I want to ask you firstly about your structure, because you said you took over the noise and vibration issues last year, but you still have a structure, don't you, where you've got operational directors for a group of lines. Why I say this is that I met in November with Peter McNaught and his team, yes, and they cover Bakerloo, Central and Victoria. Another meeting is another operational director, and so on. So my question is isn't your system set up in a sort of to create competition between these different groups in terms of who can get access to resources to deal with their concerns?
Each of these service directors have their own resources available to them for maintenance and operations. So they are essentially three separate directorates. The rationale behind me taking over the noise and vibration is I'm a centralised function. I provide engineering to each of the service directors for the Jubilee Northern and Piccadilly line, Bakerloo Central and Victoria line and the subsurface lines.
So let me get this right. So the resource for engineering is centralised directly by you?
It is.
But the three regional directors have to put in a bid to get access to that resource?
No, I ensure that I have the resources to support them on day-to-day activities for the reliability and also for engineering solutions on a wider footing. So for track, for example, that's an asset that is across all the directorates, and I have a track engineering team who focus on track as a complete entity.
Okay. So, let me then tease this out. So we know that there's a trial going on to reduce a particular nuisance, and I'm just moving away from noise nuisance, from the night train related nuisance at the moment, because what we have to recognise is that there's overground noise nuisance, there's above ground noise nuisance, there's a whole range of noise nuisance. The night tube actually seems to compound all these other noises. But tell us, why did you decide Central Line Woodford would get a trial? Was it because of their particular issue, or are you trialling that so that that can be used as a remedy for other similar noise in other areas? And what would be the resource implications for that? Have you already got that in the budget?
When we received the complaint from the residents of Woodford, we had a look at the track formation, and we couldn't find any engineering or immediate engineering problem. So the track formation was in a good condition. There was no corrugation of the track. The fixtures and fittings were complete, and there was no apparent cause. So it was what we call just the noise, essentially, that's generated by the Central Line trains going over the track. Clearly, it was causing disturbance to the people. That's why they'd complained, and that's why I asked my engineering team to source or innovate a solution. So they went out to the marketplace to see what else we could do above the usual interventions that we have. And they've found something called, well, Quiet Rail, which is a spray-on solution onto the web of the rail, which is below the crown here. And we believe that that will stop some of the airborne noise through a damping.
Is that common in other places?
No, we're going to be the first people to trial that.
Sorry?
We're going to trial it. We are, sorry, we're leading the way on that.
Yeah, but is
that as a solution.
Yeah, is that particular noise nuisance to be found elsewhere within the TfL?
We believe there are other sites that we might be able to use that as an engineering solution if it does give us the reduction in noise that we're expecting.
Right. And what sort of decibel noise is that?
Well, the manufacturer is stating 6 to 7 decibels, and we believe
60?
6 or 7 decibels.
Right, 6 or 7 decibels.
Reduction.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it goes back to the point we're trying to say now, if there was some benchmark and we went to the World Health, then that sort of noise nuisance would be way down the list, wouldn't it be? Because the World Health decibel is about 35 to 38.
For that particular site,
yeah.
I'm afraid I'm not going to start shuffling around. I believe it's about 50 decibels for that because of the proximity of the property to the running track. So
they were experiencing 50?
Yes.
Okay. So that's one of the reasons why you tried to...
and this is airborne noise. There's two types of noise we experience. One's ground-borne, which is pulsing through the ground, and the other one's airborne.
Okay.
So this solution's more for ground-borne noise. The Quiet Rail, we believe, will just stop the airborne noise of the train passing. Okay.
And I'm just asking about these things, because these things are shared. I mean, there's a very lively, quite proper network. And people are now knowing about the rubberised track called Delcor. How effective will this be? And is this site-specific, the use of something like that?
That's a much longer-term solution, and I wouldn't be able to give an answer at this point in time. I could come back to you on that specific point.
Okay. So, do you know, what we really want to understand is how residents, going from what Andrew said, we know that we believe that the complaints system and the response, from what we've heard this morning and from what I know of many years of dealing with the TfL, is so variable and in some instance haphazard. It's almost like luck of the draw. And, you know, Robert, and you're talking about having engineers and people at your house weekly.
No, I rang them weekly.
You ring them weekly?
Yeah, but they did come to my house too.
Yeah, so Duncan, I'm trying to get to a stage where would there be a standard? Are you looking to develop some sort of standard in terms of an engineering response to this epidemic of noise nuisance related to the underground and in some instance overground systems that TfL is responsible for?
We've got an agreed end-to-end process in the organisation. I manage the resources for a significant proportion of that process, but there are other interfaces that we have. So we have the customer centre. So we've got internal service level agreements between us of what's an appropriate timeline for response. So what I was looking for was a fair and consistent approach to noise and vibration complaints. And that's why I had a simplified process brought into use that everyone had to adopt. And I then hold a monthly steering group where we look through any specific issues that we have. But I hold a weekly review with my principal track engineer to go through each of the individual complaints just to make sure we're getting good traction on them.
Yeah. Are you in a position to provide us, after this meeting, with some sort of schedule that will show where you expect to be? I know that we've got some indications, like you've got on the Northern Line, a Kentish town, sometime something's happening there in this month, and at Camden Town next month and stuff like that. But my sheet is totally incomplete because you don't have the work that's going on, as I know now at the moment, at Highbury and Angel, Seven Sisters. If Joanne McCartney was here, she'd be talking about work that's expected at Tottenham. And there's Elephant and Castle. I mean, it seems to me that every borough in London is at the moment affected. Residents in every borough in London is affected.
Well, I've got...
is that the schedule?
I've got my spreadsheet of 3 or more complaints because I didn't want to bring any more paper, but I do have individual plans for every single complaint that we have. And then I monitor those against a dashboard. So for Night Tube, we have no outstanding complaints of more than 90 days that I do not have a planned intervention for.
Right. You don't have a program?
So I've broken it down into less than 90-day complaints, 90 to 180-day complaints,
yeah.
complaints over 180 days. And
the
what
category...
we have is we've got a planned intervention for every single complaint that
right.
we've received greater than 90 days. Now, the reason I did it from 0 to 90 days, I could do it 0 to 45 days, is that we are beholden to people giving us access to their properties, so we can actually then carry out an evaluation, then go out and look at our various on-site inspections, our recording vehicles and so on, just as to establish the root cause of the problem and then come up with a plan of when we're going to undertake the work.
And when you're there...
Jennette, can I just bring in Liz, who wanted to come in at that point as well?
I'm very interested to hear that after you've taken measurements and diagnosed a problem, excess noise, that you then look at the cause of it. Because your engineers came into our area in January 2014, but although we've been told no, we can't renew your track, as the engineers then promised, you have never given us any kind of reason for why we're hearing the noise. Have other people had the cause told to them?
Not a clue.
Because we would like to know what the cause is so that we can identify and relate to exactly the kinds of solutions, Jennette, that we hear in our groups, in our emails. People are talking about rubber rails, da-da-da. But we would like to know what is the cause of the problem, of the noise in our area. You may know, but we don't. So can we know, please?
Well, as a suggestion, I've got a full engineering report for each complaint that I receive, and we have the traces, etc., and it does have a conclusion and a recommendation for intervention. I've got no... I mean, if you suggesting as part of this process that we actually provide those reports, I'm quite happy to do that to people.
Obviously, we know what the reading is, but it's the cause of that reading that would be very interesting and useful.
And also the suddenness. Why did it start on a particular date? Nobody's told us why. We've talked a bit about that before. Yeah. Jennette, I just interrupted you so that we can bring in Liz.
I think that's a valuable question, because in some areas that I've been working on, Lisa, they don't have any idea what's causing. They haven't got a clue. And that's why in some areas they have to keep going back, and that's why we hear about the grinder going back 3 times. Ian, was it you who had the grinder, or was it 3 times? And so that's reducing it at a decibel. But I think the point here is if TfL was more open and more responsive and was able to say publicly, we have a problem here, in some instances, we absolutely do not understand, but we are going to keep our focus on it. Duncan, can you tell me how many times has this issue been to the board level? Do you know? Do you know if TfL's board has ever discussed this growing disturbance experienced by Londoners?
When I was asked to take over the noise and vibration steering group, I met with Mark Wild weekly until the last Night Tube service was run, and now I update Mark on a weekly basis. So once Mark had confidence that I was fully in control of the issue and then I was going to drive the appropriate solutions, he's taken the sort of hand off me, so to speak. But I had to meet him every single week and go through the numbers with him until he was assured that we were getting to grips with the problem.
I think does still appear to be a gap, though, between what you're saying, Duncan, which sounds as though internally within TfL you have a plan for many individual cases, which Andrew and Jennette have been eloquently raising along with our other guests. and then there seems to be a gap in terms of the information that's coming back to people, both on what the identified cause is that underlies, and I'm seeing a lot of nods now from a lot of the guests, and then you informing people what the cause is, and then also the timescale for coming back to actually implement the solutions. I think
that's a good summary, Chair, but can I just go back to Duncan and when he talked about the visits, their process they use, and we've heard, saying you've got a plan to implement and implementing it in TfL's world can mean 0 to 2 years. That's the experience, people. So what I want to understand is, you're saying there is no funding problems. You're saying that you've got engineers. You're basically saying, really, since you've taken over, you've got a handle on it, but you still have outstanding work around implementation that look as if they're going to be years rather than weeks and months.
I brought the reports here for the people I believe who are going to discuss their individual issues. So, for Ms Lawson in the archway, the noise was and is below the 40 decibels. We have ground it, and we ground it in spring of 2016. And there's been a 1 decibel rise since that grinding. So it was above 40 decibels, it was ground, and it then dropped down to 36 decibels from 43. And it's now risen, unfortunately, to 37, and that's in the northbound. For the southbound, it was 33 decibels, and after grinding, it's remained at 33 decibels, and it's now risen to 34. So it's risen by 1 decibel in the year, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything. We're now looking at a possibility of re-railing that site, because there is a corrugation issue, which is basically ripples on the track. And that comes back to the question of, do we have a cut-off point of 40 decibels? And the answer is no. It's still an issue to the residents of Archway, and we're going to see if we can carry out further works. Now, we've ground and it's taken it below the 40 decibels, but we've still received a complaint. We're going to see if we can re-rail it.